The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was finishing paperwork at my desk. My mother almost never called during work hours, so I knew something was already wrong. When I answered, she skipped the usual greetings. "We might need your help with Grandpa's house." I hadn't heard those words together in years, not since the time I had asked if I could stay there myself. For a moment, I didn't respond. I could hear papers rustling on her end and the faint sounds of someone moving around the kitchen. "It's some kind of property problem," she continued. "Something with the city. Your brother said you might understand it better." That part made me stop for a second. My brother almost never recommended calling me for help. "What kind of problem?" I asked. "Well, they sent a notice." She sounded unsure, like someone explaining an issue they didn't fully understand yet. Something about the estate transfer paperwork not being finished, and permits and taxes. I leaned back in my chair. Grandpa's house. Even hearing the words carried a strange weight. It had been a small place, 2 bedrooms, a wide front porch, and an apricot tree in the backyard that my grandfather refused to remove, even after the branches started leaning over the fence. Nothing remarkable, but after he died, it suddenly became the most important property in the family, at least to one person. My brother moved in less than a month after the funeral. At the time, everyone said it made sense. He was between jobs and needed stability. The house was for family, after all. No one mentioned rent, no one talked about time limits. It simply became his place. A year later, I hit a rough stretch myself. The company I worked for unexpectedly shut down a division, and my lease ended around the same time. For a few months, it felt like everything in my life was slipping at once. I still remember sitting at my parents' kitchen table explaining the situation. I wasn't asking to live there permanently, just for a little while until things settled down. The conversation stayed polite, almost too polite. My mom stirred her tea while she spoke. "Well, the house is already being used." I said I understood, I only meant temporarily. My dad folded his arms and thought for a moment. "Your brother's settled there now," he finally said. "It wouldn't be fair to disrupt that." Then there was a pause while I waited for the obvious compromise. Maybe the spare room, maybe a few months. Instead, my mother said gently, "You've always been good at figuring things out." That was the phrase she used, as if it were a compliment. I remember nodding as though it made sense. Then I left and found a sublet across town. For a while, I stayed in places that never quite felt like home. A shared apartment with a rotating group of roommates, a basement studio where the heating worked only half the time. Eventually, things improved. New job, better stability, life moved forward, and I stopped thinking about Grandpa's house as something connected to me. Years passed that way until the Tuesday phone call. "What exactly does the notice say?" I asked my mother. She hesitated. "Something about unresolved ownership from the estate." That got my attention. I now worked in property compliance. Most of my job involved untangling paperwork exactly like that. "Send me a photo of it," I said. A few minutes later, the message arrived. The city had flagged the property because the estate transfer had never been finalized. Technically, the house still belonged to my grandfather's estate on record. Taxes were overdue under the old classification, and the city had issued a deadline to resolve it. If no one fixed the documentation, the property could face penalties, or worse. I called my mother back. "This should have been sorted years ago." "Well, we assumed it was," she said. "Who's been paying the taxes?" Another pause. "Your brother handles the house." That wasn't really an answer. A week later, we all met at the property office. The building smelled of old carpet and printer ink. My brother sat across the table, looking irritated, as if the entire process were an inconvenience rather than a problem. The municipal officer reviewed the file carefully. "The issue is simple," she said. "Eventually, the estate transfer never was completed. Legally, the property doesn't belong to any of you yet." My brother frowned a bit. "But I've been living there for years." She nodded politely. "That doesn't establish ownership." She slid a document across the table. To finalize this, the heirs need to formally register the property. That also means assigning responsibility for taxes, maintenance, and occupancy. Her tone stayed calm and procedural. But until that happens, she continued, no one has the legal right to live there free rent under the estate. My brother shifted in his chair. So what does that mean? It means the property needs to be structured properly, she said. If one person lives there, they assume financial responsibility. If multiple heirs retain ownership, obligations are shared. The room stayed quiet. I noticed my parents glancing at me. For the first time, no one assumed I would simply step aside. The officer looked at the documents again. You'll need to decide how to divide this. After the meeting, we stood outside the office building. My brother finally spoke. You understand all this stuff. It wasn't an apology, just an acknowledgement. I nodded. I can help sort the paperwork. No one said much after that. A month later, the house was officially transferred. Ownership was divided between the three of us, tax responsibilities documented, maintenance obligations outlined, and if one person lived alone, they would cover the equivalent of rent. My brother signed the documents quietly. No arguments, just acceptance. When it was finished, my mother looked relieved. Thank you for fixing this. I didn't correct her because I hadn't fixed it. I just made the structure honest. Grandpa's house was still standing. The apricot tree probably still leaned against the fence, but for the first time since he died, the house no longer ran on quiet assumptions about who would carry things and who wouldn't, and that, more than anything, felt like the real inheritance.